up until this point, has conventional medicine, these drugs that they're creating, which have been very unsuccessful, we'll get into that,
Yeah.
but have they just been targeting the amyloid, or what angle have they been taking?
Great point. So most of the ones in the last 20 years have been, and by the way, it's been billions. The pharmaceutical industry has spent over $40 billion developing various treatments, which are typically anti-amyloid treatments. Now, so what happened again? People got led down the garden path by saying, aha, when you give amyloid to a mouse, it gets a smaller brain. It looks pretty much like Alzheimer's. And in fact, when you have a mutation that causes you to make more amyloid in a human, an APP mutation, you get Alzheimer's. So amyloid must be the cause of Alzheimer's. It just didn't turn out to be that simple. So bapineuzumab, solanezumab, aducanumab, donanemab, gantenerumab, crenezumab, just go right down the list. Companies saw this incredible opportunity. We're going to have an anti-amyloid antibody. We're going to remove the amyloid. We're going to make people better. We're going to make billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. And in fact, yes, if you had a drug that really worked for Alzheimer's, this could be a $500 billion drug. So, of course, the companies were all over this and poured resources and time. And so you probably heard about all the issues of fraud. This has been a really tough year for the whole field, starting with in 2021 in June, aducanumab, which doesn't make people better and doesn't stabilize Alzheimer's disease. In one trial at one dose, it slowed the decline by 22%. That was the best it did. And so they had a meeting of 11 experts to say, should this drug be approved? And they said no. 10 out of the 11 said no. One of them said, I don't know. Nobody said it should be approved. The FDA approved it anyway. And it turned out there were some clandestine meetings between the people in the company and one of the people in the FDA. It was pretty scandalous. And of course, what's happened then is the various third-party payers have said, we're not going to pay the money. This was $56,000 a year for a drug that doesn't work. And interestingly, the FDA's statement on why they approved it was really revealing, I think. What they said was, we're not approving this because it's proven efficacy. We're approving it because it's proven to remove amyloid. And we expect that to create cognitive efficacy. But that's exactly what the trials showed isn't the case. You can remove the amyloid, you don't make the cognition worse. So again, even the FDA is missing the understanding of what this disease actually is. They fully expect, as they wrote, that when you remove amyloid, people should get better. That's exactly what all these drug trials have shown us is not the case. So again, we need to go upstream and look. Now, there are other drugs, and then there was a recent other scandal, which was for Cassava Sciences, which is developing a drug called Simufilm. And this is a drug that targets filament A. And their idea was that that's an important part of this. And in fact, interestingly, a couple of experts looked into this, a couple of experts who have become part of the venture capital world, looked into the data and said, there's some red flags here. These data look fraudulent. And so they actually hired someone, they actually shorted the stock, made a lot of money from this when it came out that they were whistleblowers. They hired a guy, a scientist, very good scientist from Vanderbilt, to look into this and go through, who spent months going through all the blots, all the data. And he said, yes, there are some real red flags here. And so now the Department of Justice has got an ongoing probe into the data from Cassava Sciences. Now, ironically, the FDA has given the go-ahead to Cassava Sciences to conduct a trial. So we'll see. We'll see how the trial goes. But meanwhile, what happened was something very surprising. The expert who was going through, this is Dr. Schrag, who was going through the blots, said, where did they get the idea to do this? Well, they got the idea from a very influential paper that came out about 15 years ago from the University of Minnesota, where there was identified a specific form of amyloid called A-beta star 56, a 56 kilodalton, so it's a 12-mer a duodecamer of amyloid particles, molecules. These things stick together basically as oligomers. And the idea was that that seems to be the most toxic form. And if you just get rid of that thing, everything's going to be great. Now, the strange thing to me was we know that multiple forms of A beta show some toxicity, different for each one. And it looks like, this is, again, part of your innate immune system. So it's going to probably be, certain pathogens, it's going to be one form, other pathogens, another form. And so it's clear that these different ones. So the idea that another form has lots of toxicity didn't surprise me that much. But I think the authors felt that they had harnessed the cause of Alzheimer's. It's only going to be about that one. Now, what happened was when Dr. Schrag looked at their presentations, their blots, their publications, he saw the same red flags and really felt that there's something going wrong. Now, I've known the senior scientist who was on those publications for 40 years. She is a brilliant scientist, and I think it highly unlikely that she was doing anything but top flight research. However, I don't know the fellows who were involved in that work, so I can't vouch for them, don't know what happened. And I think, further inquiry will tell us whether this turns out to be something that's correct or incorrect. But again, my argument would be it's a somewhat of a fool's errand to go after all this time. It's going to be one tiny thing. All the research suggests that this is a network insufficiency. It's not one tiny cause. It's unlike COVID-19, it's not just one virus. We know insulin resistance is critical. We know leaky gut is critical. We know sleep apnea is critical. We know dozens and dozens of these contributors that are critical for people. And by the way, here's something that validates what I'm telling you. An article just came out where they followed people who'd had COVID or not for just a little over a year. And the sad, and I think we would have all guessed this, but the sad outcome was people who've had COVID were at a clearly increased risk for developing Alzheimer's in the year subsequent, whereas those who hadn't had it were at lower risk. So again, anything that is putting the drag on that system, whether it's lower supply, poor blood flow, poor mitochondrial function, poor oxygenation, low ketone level, or whether it's higher demand, inflammation, COVID, getting over COVID, all these things, they all will change that supply-demand ratio and downsize that network.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
We actually have a pro-inflammatory state with ApoE4, and so we have a slightly shorter lifespan and, of course, a markedly increased risk of developing Alzheimer's. Great, so we can address that.